This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Polls close in Mozambique's high-stakes election. "67 men and boys freed from an abusive Koranic school in Nigeria." And South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma, loses his bid to have his corruption charges dropped. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Shares of African mobile operator Helios begin trading at the London Stock Exchange. And Zimbabwe announces plans to raise mineral revenues to $12 billion a year by 2023. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. So we start the hour in Mozambique, where polls have closed for presidential, parliamentary and provincial elections. The elections are widely expected to extend Frelimo's decades-long rule. For more on this, here's CGTN's Brian Tassant.
Millions of Mozambicans gathered on Tuesday to cast their ballots in an election seen as a test of a recent peace deal between the ruling party and the armed opposition. Voting began early in the morning with thousands queuing to vote. Incumbent President Felipe Nyerere cast his vote in Maputo. He also called for peace throughout the election period.
One of the things that Mozambique has decided to follow is peace. Peace meaning no violence, and this will start to be part of the Mozambican culture forever. I have cast my vote and I want to appeal to all citizens to go in masses and vote. Let's continue to do so that we can show the world and the region that we are for democracy, tolerance, and this is our appeal. Let's believe and trust.
This year, a total of 40,000 observers came to oversee the process. This is an increase of 30,000 observers in comparison to the last set of observers.
It is not easy to carry out this election process, but with the help of the observers, I believe everything will be fine. The process will go well, and the party that has the best opinions and programs for the people will win.
The presidential, legislative, and provincial polls are widely expected to extend Frelimo's decades-long rule over the southern African nation.
We grew up with Frelimo. It is the only party we know of. There is no other alternative. We are used to our Frelimo. They must develop more, and there's nothing else we are looking forward to.
Let me get straight to the point. Frelimo must change, do something better. So I vote for the change.
But the country's opposition party, the Mozambican National Resistance, is hoping to use electoral changes agreed in the Peace Pact to win control of its traditional heartlands in central and northern provinces for the first time since the Civil War ended in a truce in 1992. Rights groups and analysts have warned there could be unrest if the opposition party fails to make those gains. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Well, CGTN's Amy McConaughey has been following developments on the ground in Mozambique. She joins us now live from the capital, Maputo. Amy is on the line from Maputo. Amy, of course, millions lined up at the polls today. Give us a wrap of the day's events.
Hi, yes. Well, we're currently at a polling station in Maputo, and the vote counting has already begun. Polls opened today at 7 a.m. and they closed recently, just an hour ago, at 6 p.m. Mozambican time. And the day has unfolded with relative calm. This is actually despite reports of an unprecedented level of violence in the run-up to these elections. And so the calm that we've seen today surrounding elections has actually come as a surprise to many of the observers here. We spoke to some electoral observers from the EU who said that the voting has gone smoothly, with no apparent violations, and everything appears to have gone to procedure. But there has been accusations of voter fraud, mainly from opposition groups and circulating on social media. Nothing has been confirmed other than there being 4 arrests for voter manipulation in various provinces in the country. The main challenge has been in the north, in the Cabo Delgado province, where voting stations were closed in some of the more volatile districts as a result of insecurity as part of an Islamic insurgency taking place in the area. But local journalists did say that a number of polling stations which were expected to be closed ended up actually being open today in the region, and people were able to go and vote in some of the polling stations there too.
Well, Amy, you mentioned, of course, that vote counting is already underway. When should we expect the final results? And in light of the accusations of fraud that you mentioned, are there any signs at this point that the results may be challenged?
Well, preliminary results are expected to be out as early as tomorrow, although there has been no official statement on this. And while today has been relatively calm, like you said, we have seen opposition parties challenging these results, particularly members of the opposition Renamo party who have claimed electoral manipulation. Today, Osufo Mamade, the Renamo leader, accused authorities of voter manipulation. He held up ballot papers and claimed that they had been tampered with, and told reporters it can't continue like this. He added that his party would not accept any electoral fraud. And within this context, Frelimo is widely expected to win these elections. And if Renamo fails to make gains, particularly in the provincial elections, it's unlikely that the opposition leaders will take this lying down. And this was similar in the case of the 2014 elections, where there was where Renamo rejected the results of the elections. And in this context, given the unprecedented level of violence in the run-up to these elections, analysts have expressed concerns that there will be post-election violence once the results have been announced.
Well, that is certainly something to keep an eye on. Thank you so much, Amy Mtongana, joining us there on the line from Maputo. Well, let's bring you some analysis now on the elections in Mozambique. We're joined by Gideon Chitanga in Johannesburg. He is a regional analyst with PESA, a political and economic think tank in South Africa. Gideon, thank you so much for your time. We are hearing, of course, that Frelimo looks to be in the lead in the elections. But in your view, what are the key issues that will determine the winner?
Thank you for the question. There are a lot of issues, and I think that as the voters go to this election, and depending from which region they come from, they'll be thinking about political issues in terms of political and security issues, in terms of post-election security and stability in Mozambique, specifically which of the parties has the power to maintain stability. I think that for the central and the northern regions of Mozambique, where Renamo has been dominant, issues of underdevelopment and marginalization would be key. And indeed, Renamo has been drawing its legitimacy from the fact that communities from these provinces feel that the central government in Maputo basically just marginalizes them, and development has not reached them, including the wealth that is generated from energy production, and specifically the production of gas. It is not really trickled down to the population, so there are high levels of poverty and a lack of education, which has raised the level of illiteracy in these regions. And I think that economic development overall is a major issue. Mozambicans would be worried about whether the new government or the continuation of a Frelimo government could really build on the marginal economic benefits to increase and intensify economic benefits to the broader Mozambican population. I think another worrying issue is, or an issue of concern, is the issue of corruption. And this issue is a major issue, especially in the cities where there is a young generation which came alive to state corruption with respect to a loan that was given to government secretly, and it has been a major issue in the media I think for this year and the past year. And a lot of Mozambicans feel that political elites are enriching themselves at the expense of the ordinary people, and they would wish for government to be more sensitive, more compliant with addressing developmental goals and the interests of communities.
Now, Gideon, Renamo's leadership has at times failed to inspire confidence in its ability to really contribute to lasting peace. With these elections being a major test, do you see the peace deal with Frelimo holding up?
Can you come again with that?
Just in your view, do you think that this peace deal between Renamo and Frelimo will hold up, with these elections having been a major test for that peace deal?
I actually think that there's a lot of opportunities for the peace deal to hold. But I think the most critical issue would be how the election outcome will be taken by the major political parties, Frelimo and Renamo. So if the elections outcome is seen to be peaceful, that's one key element. And the other element is the performance, will be the performance of Renamo, and particularly if Renamo were to gain some kind of control of some provinces in the devolved system of local governance. That will actually sort of not only institutionally decentralize power on paper, but Momade will be seen to be in a position to dispense some patronage, which will, I think, in the eyes of supporters of Frelimo, in the eyes of the supporters of Renamo, present Renamo as a legitimate partner in a new government. That process of accommodation will also sort of deal or address, at least in the eyes of the public, the concerns about marginalization. An outcome that accommodates everybody, where the spoils are shared by the main contesting parties, will likely legitimize this peace process and obviously allow it to be consolidated after the elections. But a disputed outcome would endanger all the efforts and the commitment to dialogue that President Nyusi has demonstrated up to this moment, and the willingness of Momade would also be undermined. And given that there's a faction within Renamo that is contesting the legitimacy of Momade's faction, I think any disputed election outcome would feed into and be exploited by the opponents in the opposition to intensify the conflict, possibly in the short to medium term.
Gideon Chitanga, thank you so much for that analysis, joining us there live from Johannesburg on the elections in Mozambique. And of course, polls have closed. Vote counting is now well underway. Turning our attention to other news now, the Congolese army is preparing to launch a major offensive against the Islamist militant group, the Allied Democratic Forces, which has been accused of carrying out widespread atrocities in eastern DRC. The army has been reinforced in North Kivu province to wipe out the rebel group. Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The military offensive against the Allied Democratic Forces is set to begin in November this year in eastern DRC. The ADF is a Ugandan Islamist group that's been operating in the DRC's North Kivu province since the late 1990s. The rebel group is accused of carrying out widespread killings in eastern DRC. In April this year, the group attacked a hospital in Butembo and killed a Cameroonian doctor working for the World Health Organization. The rebels have also carried out several attacks at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak in Beni. A UN peacekeeping force has provided the Congolese army with logistical support in the fight against the rebels. President Tshisekedi has ordered a large-scale military operation to neutralize the ADF and other militias operating in eastern DRC. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
And to South Africa now, where former President Jacob Zuma has lost his court bid to have fraud and corruption charges against him dropped. Zuma is now expected back in court on Tuesday to answer to charges of fraud, corruption, racketeering and money laundering related to the controversial 1990s multi-billion rand arms deal. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
Former President Jacob Zuma has always maintained his innocence. He says the charges are a political conspiracy. He's been in and out of the courts for the past few years, mainly to try and have the charges against him dismissed. But his efforts were thwarted this past Friday when the Pietermaritzburg court rejected his arguments and ordered for the corruption case to get underway. The former president is expected to be tried on 18 charges of fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering. Zuma claims he has no money to fund his case. He's told his supporters in the past that he's had to sell hats and socks in order to pay for his legal fees. It remains unclear whether Zuma and his legal team will decide to appeal Friday's ruling or not. The case is expected to take place over 4 days. Supporters of the former president are expected to come in their numbers in solidarity of the former statesman. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. 67 boys and men held captive are now freed from a Koranic school in Nigeria. And in Uganda, conservationists call for tougher sanctions against encroachers of bird ecosystems.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Libya, health authorities say an airstrike hit a house in the capital Tripoli, killing at least 4 people and wounding 4 others. The victims were all sisters. Their mother is in a critical condition and a 4th sister has had to have emergency surgery to amputate a leg. The airstrike hit a house near a military intelligence camp in the Libyan capital. The country's internationally recognized government has blamed the strike on forces of Khalifa Haftar. The commander, based in the east of the North African country, has been trying to seize Tripoli in the west in a ground and air campaign since April. The conflict in and around Tripoli has killed and wounded hundreds of civilians and displaced more than 100,000 people.
This was a displaced family. This house was donated to them, and now it's been hit by an airstrike. There were civilians, a girl aged 4 and another girl just 11 years old. They were innocent. This is my house, my car. My house has been damaged as well. None of us have any affiliation to any military, and we have nothing to do with this war. Someone pay attention to us and our situation. We're Libyan. We're killing each other. Why? I took them out of the rubble with my own 2 hands.
In northern Nigeria, the nearly 70 men and boys rescued from an Islamic school have now been released. Authorities visited the school after students tipped police off about their living conditions. Many were shackled and subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment. Nigerian police in Katsina City shut down the school. The school's owner and 2 teachers have since been arrested. This is the second crackdown of its kind in less than a month. Islamic schools known as al-Majiris are common across the mostly Muslim northern part of the country, and an estimated 10 million children attend them. But in recent weeks, reports have been emerging of alleged torture and sexual abuse. Staying in Nigeria, hunters are now joining an offensive against the Boko Haram extremists who've ravaged the northeast for a decade, calling it high time they help soldiers and the deadly insurgency. Authorities in Borno, in the northeast of the country, say they will be recruiting at least 10,000 local hunters to help fight Boko Haram. The governor of Borno State, Professor Babagana Zulum, says the approach is aimed at ending the 11-year war against Boko Haram and Islamic State in West Africa. CGTN's Samson Omale reports.
The local hunters with a very good knowledge of the region's harsh terrain will be drawn from different parts of the north and will work side by side with government troops. They will be armed with hunting weapons like bows, arrows and machetes and are expected to be deployed to the front lines to engage the terrorists. Some development workers and policy analysts familiar with the insurgency in the northeast have expressed concern over this new development.
Do we have their DNA, for example? Can we actually monitor the activities of these people? Can we follow up on what they do within those particular areas in the true sense of it? So I think clearly we need to develop beyond that. For some of us who go to Maiduguri, who go to Northeast, who relate with the people in the community, I can tell you clearly that quite a number of people are receiving this with a mixed feeling.
Fighting Boko Haram requires more than guns and bullets. You know, it's ideology driven. So you need the locals to actually own the fight. You know, the military should have used, multi-dimensional approach. The government needs to do certain things with these hunters before unleashing them to fish out this, to attack insurgents.
The governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, whose government will be paying for their services, is seeking the consent of the Nigerian army to offer some form of training to the hunters. The Nigerian army says it will only do that if the governor can vouch for the character of those being recruited. Samson Omale, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
A new round of cost-cutting measures went into effect on Monday at the United Nations headquarters in New York as the international body struggles to keep operating amid a severe cash flow crisis. Our UN correspondent, Lindy Mtongana, looks at what this means for the international body.
At the United Nations daily press briefing,
yes, I've asked for a list of what you're saving. Yes,
awkward exchanges about service cuts to escalators belied the severity of the organization's money woes.
I checked with the comptroller this morning. He did mention there were some partial payments coming in, but we're still trying to run through some of the numbers. So hopefully we'll have an update tomorrow.
That controller warned Friday that the UN needs at least $200 million to fill an immediate shortfall, as payments to the UN's budget are still outstanding. The funding gap has forced the UN to freeze hirings, cut non-essential travel, and put in place a wide range of other cost-cutting measures.
Now we are at a point where I still need the $135 million to pay the salaries. I cannot even afford to pay the $40 million. So I have to save every penny that I have to save. And what choices do I have? Do I say now, don't pay the air charter bills that we have to have for Afghanistan? That's the kind of call we are making on a daily basis.
The UN says dozens of countries still owe annual dues amounting to $1.3 billion, forcing the world body into its deepest deficit in about a decade.
Only 131 countries out of 193 UN member nations have paid their dues. Among those who haven't paid are 7 nations that account for 97% of the money still owed: Argentina, Brazil, Israel, Iran, Mexico, Venezuela, and the United States, which is the only permanent member of the UN Security Council that has not paid up.
The U.S. owes $674 million for the year and has historically been the largest donor to the world body. But the Trump administration has been very critical about the U.S. paying the lion's share. In a reply to a report on the deficit, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted that all member countries should pay up, not just the U.S.
We are looking at this in terms of all member states who are obliged to pay their contributions in full and on time. And we have been in touch with member states who owe significant amounts of money to the organization to see and to encourage them that we can have that cash forthcoming.
Latest measures include scaling back interpretation and documentation services, meetings and conferences, purchases of goods and services, heating and air conditioning, and utility bills. But it's unclear if these measures are enough to avert a default next month if nations don't pay up.
A severe financial crisis.
Lindy Mtongana, CGTN at the United Nations.
Bird watchers in Uganda want tougher sanctions on those who destroy the bird ecosystem. They say the rate at which forests and wetlands are disappearing is alarming. According to Uganda's Bureau of Statistics, the country loses about 90,000 hectares of forest cover every year to encroachers. CGTN's Hilary Ayasaga reports.
speaking the language of birds. Herbert Byaruhanga is calling the green Hylia. He's been doing this for 20 years.
I really feel like this is something I enjoy it. That you can make a call and the bird can respond. And then I see it. That's perfect.
But he's worried that next time it may not respond to his call. The high demand for wood fuel and timber for construction has greatly reduced the forest cover.
It's very sad that somehow, because of the burning of charcoal, we've lost a lot of cover for our vegetation.
This forest is home to about 350 bird species. Birdwatchers are pushing for the conservation of this natural habitat. Uganda is home to some of the world's endangered bird species. Most at risk are the shoebill and fox's weaver. Uganda has got about 150 shoebills remaining in the wild. The government is now taking steps to conserve their natural habitats.
For any investment to take place in Uganda today, there must be an environmental or social impact study done and a certificate of approval issued by National Environment Authority. So yes, government has mechanisms for investment, but also to check the impact of investments.
Tourism is one of the country's top revenue earners, contributing around $1.6 million annually. Herbert believes persistent conservation calls will help protect the birds, but also boost the country's revenues. Hilara Isiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Authorities in Côte d'Ivoire, in partnership with the media, are raising concerns about breast cancer in the capital, Abidjan. According to the World Health Organization, 18.4% of the population suffered from breast cancer in 2018. The disease has killed over 10,000 people across the country. CGTN's Laura Walubengo has more.
Côte d'Ivoire is raising awareness about breast cancer. The government wants to shatter the myth around breast cancer. The disease attacks both men and women across the West African nation. Around 1,000 women took part in the workshops and free screening sessions. According to participants, this day is an opportunity to get the right information on methods of breast cancer prevention.
I learned through my husband that breast cancer screening would be done for free today. So I came to get tested, and thank God everything is fine. The doctor also advised me to go to the health centers from time to time to get tested. And I plan to follow this advice because breast cancer is a terrible thing in a woman's life.
I do not have breast cancer. The doctor said that everything is okay. I'm happy. This is the first time I've done breast cancer screening. The doctors examined me and they have even advised against doing the mammogram. On the other hand, they advised me to do self-examination once a month at home and once a year at a health center.
According to the Ivorian authorities, breast cancer affects 10% of women, with a mortality rate of 54% per year. Authorities are banking on awareness, early detection and patient care to mitigate these alarming figures.
Screening structures have been set up by the government of Côte d'Ivoire. Do not be afraid of this disease because it can be cured if it's discovered early and if it's properly treated. Structures for proper treatment have been put in place by the government. Everything is available to make Côte d'Ivoire the country where breast cancer and cancer in general is no longer a tragedy.
Breast cancer is the leading cause of death among women worldwide. When diagnosed early, 9 out of 10 cases of cancer can be cured. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Shares of Africa mobile operator Helios begin trading at the London Stock Exchange. And Zimbabwe announces plans to raise mineral revenues to $12 billion a year by 2023.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion.
Libya, if you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, shares of African mobile networks operator Helios Towers rose by 1.8% on their market debut in London. The jump comes after the company raised roughly $364 million in a long-delayed share sale that gives investors a foothold in Africa's fast-growing wireless tower industry. Now, on Tuesday, Helios priced its IPO at 115 pence per share, giving it a market capitalization of nearly $1.45 billion. Helios has more than 6,800 towers spread across 5 African nations. The latest money raised from selling new shares is expected to help the firm in rolling out 4th-generation mobile services, as well as keep pace with soaring mobile data consumption on the continent. And to Zimbabwe now, the country has rolled out plans to increase diamond production to 11 million carats by 2023 from the previous 3.2 million carats in 2018. Now, this follows the government's plan to raise mining output and bolster annual revenue to an estimated $12 billion. The country's mining sector is forecasted as the main driver for reviving the economy, riddled by triple-digit inflation and high unemployment. However, investors are concerned about the safety of their investments due to acute dollar shortages in the country. Various companies, including Alrosa and Chinese-owned Anjin, are expected to drive up diamond production, mostly from the eastern Chiadzwa area. And Tanzania's President John Magufuli has vowed to continue fighting corruption and the abuse of public funds, and that's part of honoring founding President Julius Nyerere's legacy. He made the remarks in Lindy region where Nyerere Day celebrations took place. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more on that story.
It's a day when Tanzania commemorates the passing of Julius Nyerere 20 years ago. He not only led the country in fighting for its independence, but was also instrumental in helping other Southern African states fight for their freedom. Across Africa, he gained respect as an anti-colonialist, and in the power received praise for assuring that, unlike many of his neighbors, Tanzania remained stable and unified in decades following independence. He is also held in deep respect within Tanzania, where he is often referred to by the term mwalimu, which means teacher, and is affectionately referred to as the father of the nation. President Magufuli says there's still much to learn from the late Julius Nyerere.
Let me take this opportunity to say that the 5th-term government that I lead will try its best to honor the father of our nation with no fear at all.
Julius Nyerere also worked hard to promote international partnerships, especially Tanzania-China relations. During his tenure as president, he oversaw projects such as the Tazara Railway, the Rafiki Friendship Textile Mill, and many more. His connection to China created the foundations for China to become Tanzania's #1 trading partner and foreign investor. 2 decades after Nyerere's death, President Magufuli says his government will continue to fight corruption in both politics and business.
We have decided to remember him by fighting all acts of corruption, theft and abuse of public office. These are all things the father of our nation hated and despised when he was alive.
The Tanzanian government says it's faithfully implementing many of Nyerere's philosophies, such as improving the welfare of its people through anti-corruption measures and the promotion of good governance. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, head of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, has painted a downbeat picture of the world economy in her first major address since her appointment. Georgieva, who is the former chief executive officer of the World Bank, said a more severe slowdown could require governments to coordinate fiscal stimulus measures. She also said the fund will cut its growth forecast for both 2019 and 2020 in its next World Economic Outlook. Now, the fund's latest outlook will be released at its annual meeting in Washington. In July, the fund lowered its projection to 3.2% this year and 3.5% next year, making it its fourth downgrade since last October. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has wrapped up a visit to Saudi Arabia. Now, during his visit to Riyadh, 20 agreements were signed at a ceremony in the royal palace. Now, the contracts are estimated to be worth billions of dollars, covering the aerospace, health, and agriculture industries. Putin also signed a key oil deal with Saudi Arabia to bolster cooperation amongst OPEC plus countries. However, there seems to be no major changes from the previous deal, which of course has taken 1.2 million barrels of oil per day off the market since January. Now, aside from energy cooperation, Putin and Saudi officials also discussed military and technical cooperation. Meanwhile, the United States recently received the green light to impose tariffs on European imports worth about $7.5 billion. It is the latest chapter in a 15-year battle between the US and the EU over illegal subsidies for plane makers Airbus and rival Boeing. Now, this followed a ruling by the World Trade Organization, which basically paved the way for the United States to impose the trade sanctions ranging from aircraft to cheese, olives, and jumpers from 18th October. Here's CGTN's Elia Helpern with more.
In a meeting that lasted only 20 minutes, the WTO agreed that the US can impose sanctions on French exports in the ongoing subsidy dispute between the two nations. That's after the World Trade Organization found that France is illegally subsidizing the aircraft manufacturer Airbus. The tariffs are expected to be on agricultural goods such as cheese and wine, as well as civilian aircraft, and will affect other countries involved in Airbus too. European governments, along with Airbus, are calling for a negotiated settlement, since 40% of their raw materials come from US aerospace suppliers. The EU delegation to Geneva says it has serious concerns about these tariffs, which it believes to be short-sighted. With tariffs on agricultural goods as well as aircraft manufacturing, France is set to lose $2.4 billion, which is 0.1% of its growth. The new tariffs could also hurt the Americans, since the US supply chain supports 270,000 American jobs, according to a statement from Airbus. And the WTO is also considering a parallel case against the US for subsidizing Boeing, but France will have to wait until 2020 until it knows what level of retaliation it can enforce. And while French subsidies have been phased out over the past decade, the US government has not followed France's example. In the past, both parties have usually been able to agree a settlement, and retaliation rights are rarely granted. But this time, the US says it will penalize France to the fullest extent. The tariffs are expected to come into effect as early as Friday this week. Leah Heilpen, CGTN, Paris.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now, where Customs Chief Hamid Ali says a ban on goods coming into the country across its land borders will last as long as it takes for neighbors to stem the flow of smuggled merchandise. Now, Ali also said that all imports should now come through the country's ports. The entry points will be monitored more easily and generate a much-needed revenue. President Muhammadu Buhari unexpectedly closed Nigeria's borders to goods traded in August. He said the closure will end rampant smuggling across the porous frontiers. Now, the decision has had a devastating impact on Benin, which is Nigeria's neighbor to the west and a key exporter of agriculture to Africa's most populous country. It has also pushed up prices for staples such as rice at markets around Nigeria.
It is important to note that 95% of illicit drugs and weapons that are being used for acts of terrorism and kidnapping in Nigeria today come in through our porous borders. However, since this partial closure, the acts have become drastically reduced. Our conclusion is that the arms and ammunition these terrorists and criminal elements were using no longer gains access into the country.
And shifting focus now, longing to show his artwork to the world, an Egyptian sculptor and business owner has opened a museum cafe where guests can marvel at his works as they sip on their coffee. Now, the eclectic museum depicts a random entertaining collection. However, after a cup of coffee with the owner, the clients will learn how it all ties together to represent the people's struggle and the unfortunate survival of corruption throughout the various ages and regimes. Here's CGTN's Asta Tal with more on his story.
Art is globally regarded as a way of life. For Nassar al-Sharibini, art is an outlet that offers him a platform to express his creativity and imagination. To push his experience to greater heights, he set up a cafe that also serves as a home for his art, while also offering customers a cultural view with their beverages.
I created the statue of the evil witch. The evil witch statue is 4 meters long. It weighs approximately 400 kilograms. The statue took around 6 months of work. I represented terrorism through the evil witch. The evil witch is flying on a broom. I wrote on the broom, I roam the world for evil, for I am evil like all of you.
It is clear from some of the work on display that this cafe is not for the faint-hearted. Despite the gruesome depictions of art, others admire the diversity of the items on display, which range from tributes to famous people and cultural symbols to animals.
You feel as though you're going into a field of thoughts, a garden of thoughts. Today you can sit in a corner that represents something special. For instance, the one we are sitting in is the corner of the great, such as Angelina Jolie. Another corner can be about crocodiles. You can sit with live crocodiles underneath you. It is the first time that I see a place with live animals. It also has sculpting workshop as well as drawing workshop. I see people coming in here to work. It's honestly a terrific place.
The cafe, which opened in 2017, features 70 statues and 90 taxidermied animals. Indeed, Sharibini has transformed his shop into a fascinating little world for creative criticism. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up ahead on Global Business Africa, Nigerian government officials and labor unions in last-minute talks aimed at averting a nationwide civil servants strike. We'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, as the world prepares to mark World Food Day, we explore the flavors and recipes of Senegal.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Senegal is known as the land of teranga, meaning hospitality in the local Wolof dialect. Food plays a central role in this special brand of hospitality. A blogger in the capital city, Dakar, is sharing not only Senegalese dishes, but also the spirit of teranga.
If you want to get to know the vibrant coastal town of Dakar, food is the best place to start. Before Ibrahima Doy, a food blogger, prepares his dish, he heads to a local market. The meal Ibrahima prepares today will be shared on his blog for his global audience to get a taste of Senegal's cuisine.
A lot of other nationalities are interested in our cuisine. I receive plenty of messages from people who live in England, Italy, New Zealand, Australia, and they more or less know Africa or have African friends, African partners, and want to know about African cuisine.
For today's dish, he's preparing bakalu saloum. The rice dish is traditionally mixed with powdered peanuts, vegetables, and dried fish, though Ibrahima is switching it with meat for today. Once it's done, he will share the recipe with his combined 1,300 followers on Facebook and Instagram. Before any dish appears on his blog, Ibrahima's workshop, it has to be just right.
There is a common problem with African dishes. The quality of our online food videos is not good. The list of the ingredients is usually not complete. The recipe is not very precise, and the way they film is not good at all. So I had the opportunity to take up the challenge and show that even being in Senegal, in Africa, we can promote our own cuisine, our know-how in terms of gastronomy.
Once the work is out of the way, Ibrahima and his friends dig into the tasty dish. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's go to South Africa now, where a contemporary fair of handmade products has, over the past 10 years, helped many African entrepreneurs exhibit their crafts and designs. The three-day market displays fashion, homeware, jewelry, and artisanal products from across the continent, giving SMEs a better chance of penetrating the market. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Celebrating this year's theme, Memories and Dreams, Handmade Contemporary reflects on its legacy of showcasing African entrepreneurs and their creativity.
One of the big characteristics that we look for in a brand and in a business is authenticity. It needs to be handmade, it needs to be handcrafted, as well as high-end. The purpose of this is giving people the platform to showcase their talent, to showcase their entrepreneurship skills. And Handmade Contemporary Fair is not only there to promote and celebrate Africans, it's here to uplift South Africa and Africa as a whole.
Tsepo Rakale, founder of Gallant, is seeking to boost his brand here and bring authenticity to clients.
We create bespoke wear, and it's made mainly in South Africa. We try to change the status quo of fashion in South Africa. Most of my garments have like locally made South African fabrics here, and we just bring out bespoke wear to the world. I can't single out a specific market, but I feel like the whole world, let's say Europe, China, Africa as a whole, should be ready for the home of bespoke wear, South African tailoring.
Ashanti Shades Duo is also attracting new buyers with their African-style bespoke outdoor furniture.
For Ashanti Shade, we are hoping, because we've never been in a fair like this is our first, so we're hoping to get people to know about us and also to see us as a serious brand that has something to offer.
I think for us it's been important to be here because it gives us the forum to show off our products to the South African and hopefully the African market. Also in Hyde Park we have a lot of international people that come here, and for us we find that the international market is really favouring African products at the moment.
With over 120 exhibitors, this handmade fair exposes SMEs and increases their sales.
This is what I do. I do ceramic design, and to be here, it is a great honor. We get to meet buyers from people that are getting stuff for themselves, for the collectors, and you actually get to meet people who can actually stock from you, get a lot of things for their shops, for their decor shops, and so I think being here is very important to us as entrepreneurs.
The switch to buying local products is driving a handmade revolution. It's a welcome boost for small businesses and entrepreneurs in a country where unemployment is at 29%. Judy Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And coming up in your sports news. 3 Kenyans nominated for the 2019 IAAF Female World Athlete of the Year Award.